Did you hear that 91% of guys that use Dove Men Plus Care antiperspirant recommend it? Dove Men Plus Care user Andrews said that it's like a mask that hides his smelly secrets. And I'd imagine that Andrews' friends are very thankful. Pick up some new Dove Men Plus Care antiperspirant for yourself at your local retailer.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Subscribe now by going to the Listen tab in the ESPN app.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Here we are. We're back in better than ever. Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. Get out a red pen and make a circle on your calendar. October 17th, 8 o'clock. Celtics at Cavaliers to open the NBA season. And in case you haven't heard, that game's going to look a little different than you might have previously expected. Golic, the Kyrie Irving trade goes down last night, and it is in every way a blockbuster.
As I heard my son Mike say on First and Last this morning, sometimes the golf gods there are no golf gods, but there are sports gods. The sports gods can give you something that is magical, and that would be on a Tuesday night in the NFL season, this game. So you have this night, NBA. This night is yours to have this matchup in Cleveland, which is going to be amazing. They meet 3 times this year, obviously the first time being the first game of the season. And then we'll see where it goes from there. The hate will be out. It will be masked by love, but it will be there nonetheless. And we'll see what happens. At the end of the day, listen, we're going to break down this trade. But let me just make my initial statement of this. Nothing has changed. That the Cleveland Cavaliers are still going to go to the NBA Finals. And the biggest question is, are they going to play the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals to get there or not?
In that perspective, I agree with you. That doesn't change in the short term. I believe the Cavaliers remain the team to beat in the Eastern Conference, right, and maybe even more so than they previously were. But it does change things, obviously, in the long run.
It absolutely does in the long run. I'm talking about the here and now. That's this whole NBA offseason, of which we were mesmerized. Every move that was made was put to the backdrop of, are you better capable of beating Golden State now? And there was nothing that was done that said that. And then this move was made. When this move was made, the thought was, okay, does this, before you even get to Golden State, does this change anything coming out of the East? And in my eyes, it does not. Cleveland still comes out of the East. As I said, will Boston play Cleveland in the Eastern Finals? But as far as the bigger question, it's also, I don't think, done anything to make us think Cleveland would be the favorite playing Golden State in the finals as well. Though Jay Crowder, he's the interesting one in all this as far as his defense is 3-and-D, as we call it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so let's start by throwing the question out to you. I put the Twitter poll question up immediately. I didn't even wait till I got in here this morning. The question is very simple. Which side got the better of the Kyrie Irving trade? And it's on my
tough to answer
Twitter page.
I mean, it's a base, and I get it. I get the question. You did put it up without asking me. Yeah. I thought we had decided that you would have to ask my permission, but I guess once the show is ending, all bets are off. You do whatever you want.
I wasn't looking at it that way, but
yeah, right, whatever.
This one just felt like a no-brainer.
But to me, I mean, it's now or in the future, because now it's Cleveland, in the future it could be Boston. So, I mean, that's a tough one to answer.
Here's why I think the answer is what you just said. My personal opinion, let's start with this. The overwhelming winner of this trade, in my opinion, is Cleveland for the following reason. Because the recent history of the NBA has been Team X has a superstar that demands a trade.
Right.
And they just get absolutely destroyed.
Yeah, you're right.
So that didn't happen here.
No, it did not.
So in that regard, if in that regard alone, Cleveland comes out of this a huge winner, it doesn't even necessarily mean they do better in the deal than Boston, but they still win. Because if you look at what Indiana got for Paul George and you look at what all these other teams got for their great players in some cases maybe better than Kyrie Irving, look at what teams got for Carmelo Anthony, although they got a lot in Denver for Carmelo Anthony, and that's a different story. But if you look at these teams that lose their superstars and never able to recover, Cleveland definitively is a winner, even if the Celtics wind up getting the better of the trade. That's my first reaction.
I'm with you there. And let's also remember one other thing for you Cavalier fans. As hard as you're going to root for your team this year, you're going to root against Brooklyn because you get that unprotected pick, first-round pick. They had 20 wins last year, and if, in fact, LeBron does leave next year, you're going to need a big-time pick to try and start to move forward, and that could be a pretty high pick.
Well, but so that brings us to a year from now.
Right.
So, in my opinion, overall, the Celtics get the better of this deal because I believe that one of the things that is obvious from this is the Celtics had no intention of building their future
around
financially and otherwise around Isaiah Thomas. Because if they did, there was no reason to make this deal. Drake Koetter is an incredibly valuable player.
Yes,
you just used the 3-and-D term. He has a ridiculously reasonable contract that runs another 3 seasons.
Right.
So, and they give up an unprotected, as you just pointed out, lottery pick that could very well wind up being the first pick
Boston
in the draft.
had a ton of assets to use for a situation like that.
And we've been waiting, and they finally do, and they use it on Kyrie Irving. So, in my opinion, if the Celtics had if there's any question in their mind about the hip of Isaiah Thomas, that's different. But I believe they didn't think that they were going to build it. They're not going to give $200 million to Isaiah Thomas. So, in that regard, I believe they actually wind up winners in this trade. They get what they really wanted in this deal.
The other side of this, as long as LeBron is on the Cavaliers, they have won this trade because they'll still be in the finals. They got back more, just as you said earlier, more than normally you're getting for a player that demands a trade. So they will win this trade as long as LeBron's on the team. And then, depending on what that first pick is for Brooklyn and what kind of player you get to build for your, regardless, you're building for your time after LeBron. You're playing with LeBron right now to be in the championship. But that's only for a couple of more years. That's if he stays in Cleveland. It's still for a few more years. So you get a first-round pick to mature over that time as well to kind of keep rolling when LeBron is gone.
They did the impossible, Mike. They did both.
They did.
We were talking about do you try and win now or do you build for the future with this asset? And they did both.
Agree.
So that's why I phrased the question the way I did. I believe both teams win. I believe both teams did well last night. I think both teams are happy this morning. So the question is, which side do you think got the better of the deal? I think it's a fascinating question because you can have a trade is not meant for one side to fleece the other.
Right.
Trades, generally speaking,
you want to get a win-win.
Are meant because both sides want to do it. And in this case, both sides were motivated for whatever reason they did. I think both teams wind up coming out of this well. Who got the better of it? You can cast your vote on Twitter.
Yeah, I guess if I were to answer that question, I would answer it in the now and say Cleveland because I'll just look to next year because this has a lot of ancillary parts to it. And the fact for Boston, you have Gordon Hayward, who's 27. You have Kyrie Irving, who's 25. You're building around your last couple of lottery picks in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who the Celtics did not want to give up. Cleveland wanted Jason Tatum, and Boston was doing everything in the world not to give him up. So they got those couple of young pieces, the young Kyrie Irving, the Gordon Hayward coming in. So they're looking good down the road, no doubt about it.
Well, they're going to require name tags when they show up for their first practice. Yeah. Do you know how many Celtics remain from last year's roster? Bear in mind, they were the number 1 seed in their conference, and they made the conference final. Now, that felt like a mirage the entire time, but the facts remain. They were the number 1 seed in their conference, and they made the conference final. Do you know how many of them are left on that team?
I'm going to guess 4.
4 is exactly right.
I knew it was.
So you saw the stat already.
Yeah, I did.
It's Al Horford, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and Terry Rozier are the only Celtics remaining. Not from 3 years ago, not from 30 years ago, but from 3 months ago. There are only 4 guys left on a team that finished first in the conference and made it to a conference final, and yet no one can argue that they did the wrong thing by breaking up what they had and starting it over. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. We've got Jeff Goodman in here in about 20 minutes with his perspective on the deal. Our Kevin Pelton, ESPN insider, grades the trade as follows. He gives the Cavaliers an A. He gives the Celtics a C.
Yes, he does.
Here's the only reason I could see to give the Celtics a C, and that is if they don't have some idea that Kyrie Irving wants to be there long term. Kyrie Irving has, as everybody knows, because we've been following this since we knew he wanted out of Cleveland, has 2 years left on his contract.
Right.
If they lose him in 2 years, then they definitively lose
without
this
question.
trade,
yes.
If only because of the draft pick they gave up. But I have to believe in a world where Magic Johnson can get accused of tampering, but we all know that all these conversations take place behind the scenes.
Yes, they do.
They know that Kyrie is willing to stay there long term. So long as he does, they didn't want to build around Isaiah Thomas.
No.
So X him out. However good you think he is, Kyrie Irving is better, and X him out. So they basically traded Crowder, who's a very good player.
Yes, Crowder. Don't get Crowder lost in this trade.
Not at all.
On what he was in Boston and what he can do in Cleveland.
Yes, I think he's a really good player. But they traded him and an unprotected first-round pick that is most likely going to be a very, very high pick for Kyrie Irving.
Right.
I think that's a good deal. I mean, that's how good Kyrie Irving is.
So let's both try now and have a little fun, and let's mention the third player that was in this deal and try and get his name right.
Well, I believe it's Ante Zizic.
Now, I've heard Ante Zizic. So what Himbo and I did before the show is he pulled up a broadcast.
Okay.
And it was pronounced 3 different ways in said same broadcast. So like Wojnarowski.
Right.
Wojnarowski. It's Wojnarowski.
We'll just call this guy the Ziz?
Yeah, Ante Zizic, who played, was it in Croatia last year? And, oh, by the way, of the 3 players traded, he was the highest draft pick. He was the highest pick of the 3. He was taken 23rd by the Celtics in 2016. Crowder was taken 34th, ironically, by Cleveland in 2012. And in 2011, Isaiah Thomas was taken 60th. He was the last pick in the draft in 2011. Any guess who the first pick in the draft was that year?
It was Kyrie Irving.
It was Kyrie Irving. So Zizic.
Ante Zizic. I was told Zizic, and then I was trying to write it down phonetically.
I said the same thing to Hembo. I don't know what's phonetic for Ziz.
How do you? I would challenge.
Spell Ziz.
Tweet at us.
Yeah, Ziz.
At us. How would you? If his name is indeed pronounced Zizic.
Okay, and it's spelled Zizic, and it's pronounced either Zizic or Zizic or something, but how do you phonetically spell Ziz?
Yeah, how would you write that down? How would you spell it in such a way that when you looked at it, you would immediately have it? I don't know. I tried it here, and I just wrote it as it's spelled.
I was you a half hour before that, because I first thing I did is I come in and I had 2 names for Hembo to get for me. And one of them was Zizic or Zizic, however, and I had my pen ready to go, okay, I do everything phonetically.
Right.
And he went, Zizic, and I went, what the hell did you just say?
That's exactly what it is.
I said, what am I supposed to do with that?
You're not getting us any closer. Well, one way or another, he and Jay Crowder and a first-round pick from the Nets and Isaiah Thomas are on their way to Cleveland for Kyrie Irving. Let's go at the mics, brought to you by Dove Men Plus Care. Did you know that 91% of guys that use Dove Men Plus Care antiperspirant recommend it? If you're heading to the gym right now, you should pick some up on your way. Let's listen along the way to Jeff Van Gundy with his thoughts on the trade.
Well, I think Cleveland did an outstanding job after everyone knew Kyrie Irving wanted to be traded, to be able to get a great point guard in Isaiah Thomas, someone who can complement LeBron James, a very good 3-4 man in Jay Crowder on a great contract, and then that first rounder from next year. I think it puts him in great position to retain LeBron James, as well as they'll have a lot of options if James decides to go someplace else. So I thought Cleveland did a terrific job.
Do you know who needs to run silent, run deep today?
Yeah.
The Pacers.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. So that's what Cleveland got for Kyrie, and this is what we got for Paul George.
Yeah, 2 years of Kyrie versus 1 year of Paul George. I mean, it is. That's why the Cavaliers get an A. Because the bar was set so low.
Yep.
And bear in mind, they're going to get Dwayne Wade. Okay, let's stop talking about this as a possibility. Mm-hmm. This is no longer if; it is when.
Right.
The Bulls will buy out Dwayne Wade. There is no conceivable reason, from their perspective or his, for him to play an entire year in Chicago on what might be the worst team in the NBA. So Dwayne Wade is going to be in Cleveland. So now you got LeBron, you got Kevin Love. The question is, what exactly is Isaiah Thomas at this point with the hip? How bad is that injury?
Right.
What do you know?
Brad Stevens, his coach, had said there was question whether he would be ready for the start of training camp. It was a labrum in his hip. They opted for no surgery. It was, in game 2 against the Cavaliers when he heard it.
They were down 60 at the time.
This is one of those where you opt for no surgery and you try and heal it, and then you pray to God after that time that it's supposed to heal, that you don't say, we were wrong and now you need surgery, because then you're in a whole lot of trouble. So there is question on whether he'll be ready for training camp or not. So we'll see.
I believe I think I'm going to make the following statement. If Isaiah Thomas is 100% of Isaiah Thomas, and he doesn't have to be in October. If by sometime in the middle of the season, he's 100% of what he was a year ago, I believe the Cavaliers are even more a lock to win the Eastern Conference than they were yesterday. And I think they have a better chance against Golden State than
we'll
they did
see there.
yesterday.
Crowder helps on the D side because we keep talking about how do you match up with Golden State, and they have to match up more. They had the offense. Isaiah gave offense in Boston. He can give you offense here. LeBron can, and Love can hit his shots as well. Crowder, gives you that, as I said, 3-and-D. He'll shoot the three. He shot a career high, I think 40% from threes last year. Took just under 400, I believe, of them. Shot 300 3-point shots. And then he can play some D on the wing, which is what they need. So that's what they're looking to do. Now, in no way, shape, or form would they be the favorite at all against Golden State. But this is what we do now. This is exactly what we do with moves that are made, is how do you match up against Golden State? And with Cleveland, that's all you talk about because that's where they're going to be.
They need another, do they have enough big people? So I just wrote down the names of what will be their primary rotation players. Who am I missing? You got LeBron, you got Kevin Love, you got Jay Crowder, you got Isaiah Thomas. I'm putting Dwayne Wade on this team. I don't know when he'll get there, but he's going to be there. Tristan Thompson, J.R. Smith. Oh, they have Derrick Rose.
Derrick Rose.
I forgot about Rose.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have Derrick Rose. So they need one more big guy. Is Iman Shumpert still there? I've lost track of who's on which team.
Did you put Zizic in there?
Oh, that's
You got Zizic.
You're right. He's a big.
Zizic.
They've got.
You got Ante.
They got Ante.
You got AZ. Let's call him AZ.
A through Z.
Let's do that.
They've got the whole alphabet.
They've got the Croatian AZ.
The Croatian
the
sensation.
Big man. Yeah.
Well, you're right. You know what? They're loaded. I mean, the Cavaliers are loaded.
I mean, AZ is destined to be an all-star.
I forgot about Jeff Green. They do. They have half the NBA. Half the NBA is on the Cavaliers. Just name a player you've heard of. He's on the Cavaliers.
The only problem is the other half of the NBA, which is
their roster.
The only problem is the other half of the NBA, which is better, is on Golden State.
You're right. You're right. But they just pulled up the Cavaliers roster in front of me. Quickly count that. How many names is on that list?
8, 10.
20. There are 20 people currently on the Cavaliers. Yeah. Richard Jefferson is still there. Oh, I forgot about Kyle Korver. He's still there.
And oh, by the way,
Darren Williams is still there.
You know who is happy right now? Dan Gilbert. He's not writing as big a tax check. The 3 players they got don't even equal what Kyrie makes. So is from the luxury of the tax situation that they have been shelling out. Well, not they. Dan has been shelling out. That won't be as big this year.
The only true center they have, unless Zizic is a center, I know he's a big, the only person who has a C next to his name is Tristan Thompson, and he's 6'9".
He says he's 6'9", and AZ is 6'11".
Yeah, Zizic is 6'11".
And he's not, from what I understand, not the most athletic person in the world.
I have to admit to not having studied a lot of tape.
I have not seen a lot of tape. I'm going to go on others on AZ. I am now calling him AZ, by the way.
As far as the trade is concerned, here's the reaction of our Mark Jackson.
If Kyrie Irving was not happy, which we know, and wanted to be traded, which is well documented, well, you could not have gotten a better package. You went and got a guy that can do some of the things that Kyrie does on the offensive end. You went and got a guy that, for a stretch of the season last year was the best closer in the game in the fourth quarter, statistically. So the question, it boils down to this: is the gap between Isaiah Thomas and Kyrie Irving, Jay Crowder, the big fella, and potentially the number 1 pick? I think they're both great players. I don't think the gap is that extreme. So in that aspect, I look and say, well, the Cavs, won the deal, but I think it was a great deal for both teams.
That's one way to not have to pronounce Zizic by calling him the big fella.
But I totally agree with Mark's thinking.
I do as well.
The gap between those two guys is not as wide as Jay Crowder, much less all the rest of the people.
Completely agree.
Look, Isaiah Thomas last year, I get it. He's only 5'9". Isaiah Thomas last year was in the MVP discussion. If you were paying attention to the NBA last year, he deserved to be in the MVP discussion. He did. He was the best player in the fourth quarter in the whole league.
So, but we'll see what he does this year. And then the next discussion is Cleveland giving him the max?
Well, so
next summer he's that, and he says he's a max player. But why wouldn't you say that? So I know. Listen, that's why in this thing there are so many ways to go. A couple of years down the road with Kyrie, this summer for Isaiah. But let's. At some point, let's stick to the beginning of the season and see where this thing goes. And for Kyrie, listen, Kyrie was Batman on a horrible team, and the team went nowhere. Kyrie became Robin and won a championship and has been to the finals. And now he gets to put on the Batman costume again. How's it going to fit? I have no idea.
But he's going to get a chance on a storied franchise, and we'll see how that turns out. We're going to get Jeff Goodman's reaction coming up in just a few moments. He'll tell you how the deal went down. He'll be on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. You'll hear from Danny Ainge on why he made the deal. And we're asked to put someone in the zone, Mike. That's brought to you by AutoZone. Drive the new Duralast GT brake pads. Proven tough from the tracks to the streets and sold only at AutoZone. Get in the zone with AutoZone. Who's in the zone at times like this? The NBA insiders. So, Woj was working the deal and had all the breaking news last night, and all of our NBA insiders were working it, but no one more than our buddy Brian Windhorst.
Absolutely right.
I'm putting him in the zone. Mm-hmm. You want to read his tweet?
I don't have
it's right up there on the screen.
Okay, this is from Windy. I'm in Rome. It's 1:30 a.m., and my wife may be considering divorce. I leave analysis of Cavs-Celtics trade to my able colleagues. Good night.
That was from Wendy.
I tweeted to that. I answered that. I said, smart move. Absolutely, positively a smart move. If the wife is going to get a little antsy about that one, you just back off and say, hon, what do you want to do in Rome today?
Yeah, the NBA insider types have had themselves quite a busy summer. This has been one of the best. Listen, I'll say it again. This year, the NBA offseason was the best of their seasons. The postseason was second. The regular season was third.
The best of Mike and Mike.
A lot of Twitter reaction to Golic's thoughts on the player union issue in the National Football League. We'll get back to that. We're going to have Bill O'Brien, head coach of the Texans, coming up in just a minute or two for you here. But first and foremost, all this reaction to the big NBA trade. Tremaine tweets at us, Kyrie is better than everyone involved. That first-round draft pick could come back to bite them. By them, of course, he means Boston. We had Jeff Goodman on saying that next year's draft is projected to be absolutely loaded. Golic has made the point all morning long. The Celtics and Cavaliers could wind up meeting in the Eastern Conference Finals again next year, and then they could, right after that, have the first and second picks in the draft.
Which everybody else in the East is just collectively throw up their hands and go find a cliff.
Bradley Walsh tweets at us, are you guys taking into consideration that Isaiah flourished under Brad Stevens' offensive genius? Maybe it won't be that in Cleveland.
Well, you don't know. You're exactly right. Whatever sport you're in, if you take a player who was successful, put him on another team in a different system, you're not sure what you're going to get until that player gets there.
And obviously the flip side of that is, will Isaiah Thomas actually be even more impactful offensively with LeBron James on his team, who generally has made everybody better offensively throughout his career? And then quickly, before we bring in the coach, there's another one here that brings up the question of, does Isaiah Thomas have to pass a physical? I mean, everyone knows he's hurt, right? They know about the hip. They know where he is.
Right.
The Cavaliers obviously know that. Would you assume their doctors have had a chance to see him? They see the medical. How does something like that work?
I don't know. Normally when you do a trade, the person has to pass a physical, but you do know this injury, so I don't know what else was talked about. That's way above my pay grade.
I'd be curious to see if there was somewhere a little note in how that worked out. What is it the Cavaliers?
Right.
What were they allowed to know? Do they have just doctors' reports
medical records?
Boston?
Whatever that may be.
We'll find out. All right, one way or another, that is the big story in sports this morning. But there's so much going on out there, and let's turn our attention to a little football here. One of the teams that we've had our eye on throughout this preseason because of an interesting quarterback battle has been the Houston Texans, and their coach Bill O'Brien joins us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Coach, good morning. How are you today?
Morning, guys. How you doing?
We're doing
great.
Well,
Coach.
Obviously, you've got a couple of quarterbacks there in camp that everyone is watching. Savage, who you've had in the system for a while, and Deshaun Watson. And there's been a lot of early praise for him. I certainly have been very impressed with what I've seen from him. Can you give us your view from where you sit on where they stand right now, a couple of weeks before the season begins?
Sure. Tom's had a really strong camp. He's, like you said, he's been in our system for 4 years. He has really good command of what we're trying to do, the type of tempo we want to run, changing plays at the line of scrimmage, protection calls. He's been around for a little bit, and he has a really good understanding of what we're doing, and he's playing well. He's executing well. I think he's only thrown 3 incompletions in 2 preseason games, which, that's pretty good. And so then you have Deshaun, who's come in here and really done a good job of picking up this offense very quickly. He's been able to come in here and improve every single day, especially mentally. That's one of the biggest things. He's been able to learn. Let's just say he makes a mistake one day, the very next day, or even sooner than that in a meeting. He'll understand right away what the mistake was, and he'll improve on that the next day. So he's gone out and played pretty well himself. So I really like the room that we have. We have Brandon Whedon at number 3, and he's a great guy and a fun guy to coach, and we've got a really good situation here.
Yeah, listen, I think so. Before the draft, I had said I think Deshaun Watson's the best quarterback coming out of this draft, and we'll see if and when it comes to fruition in Houston. But with Savage being the starter, and I know your top receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, gave Savage like public praise, saying he's the guy, should be the guy, and talking about him. I'm curious, when Hopkins does that publicly, had he talked to you? Had you guys? Do you have discussions with the receivers and other offensive guys about it? I know it's your decision, but how often is that decision talked about with the other players, like DeAndre talked about it publicly?
Yeah, I haven't really talked to the other players about it. I think what DeAndre's seeing is what we've seen in practice for the last few years. Basically Tom has had an unlucky 3 years. He's been injured quite a bit. He was injured his rookie year. He was injured the next year. He was injured at the end of last year. And, that's going to be a big key for Tom is staying healthy. But when he's been out there, he throws the ball very accurately. He throws it on time. He, like I said, he has a really good grasp of our offense. He throws a catchable ball. And the thing about the young guy, Deshaun, is he has a lot of the same qualities. They have different skill sets, but Deshaun throws a very accurate ball, and it's been a good camp because the ball has been placed in the right spot, and I think that helps your team, Mike. You know what I mean? Like when you have some quarterbacks back there that can throw the ball accurately, I think that helps everybody compete a little bit better.
Completely agree. And accurately doesn't just mean completion. It means throwing your guy open, letting him get yards after the catch.
Right.
I completely get what you're saying. We're talking to Bill O'Brien, head coach of the Texans. Another shift we're kind of seeing, Coach, is the starters a lot of times playing less in these preseason games and more of teams getting together to practice during the week before the preseason game. So I've been trying to explain it on air, but obviously we'd much rather hear it from you of just how big those benefits are of having a few days of practice. You guys have done it with the Patriots this year, how that's becoming a bigger and bigger thing and the benefits from that.
Yeah, I can't tell you enough how much I believe in the joint practices. Last week when we were in West Virginia, the Patriots came, and we had a good 2 days with them. And it was good because, our practice schedules are pretty similar, so it was a pretty seamless transition to going from practicing against each other to practicing against them. And we, Coach Belichick and I decided let's just have a really good 2 fundamental days, 2 days of good fundamental, tough, hard-nosed football. It was clean. Both teams, I think, have a real healthy respect for each other. I know both coaching staffs do, and it was a good 2 days. And now, today, we practiced this morning, and then we're leaving this afternoon, and we're going to go basically do the same thing against the Saints. We did it last year with Sean Payton, and it was awesome. I mean, I can't say enough about it. In fact, I was talking to a couple of retired coaches over the summer, and it's been going on for a while, and I think, to me, it's really a good way to improve your team. It breaks up the monotony of camp. It also brings your team together. Your team is, you're rooting for the other side of the ball to do well, which is different than when you're going against each other. It's a little bit different. So I just think it's a great way to improve your team.
Mike and Bill O'Brien, coach of the Texans. How would you compare the work you get there to the work the players get in preseason games? Because one wonders with the commissioner talking about potentially shortening the preseason, could this be something that could lead to – could you deal with one fewer or even 2 fewer preseason games if you're getting more of this kind of work?
Absolutely. This is just one man's opinion. If I had, one vote, I would vote for more joint practices. I think in the preseason, one of the things that we all, basically you're trying to get your team down to a 53-man roster, and it takes about 6 weeks to kind of figure that out. But it's basically maybe let's just say you have player 1 through 20 that you kind of know are going to be on your team, and then it's who are player 21 through 53. And the preseason games are good opportunities for those guys. But player 1 through 20, you've got to make sure that those guys are healthy. You want everybody healthy. I'm not saying that you want everybody to be healthy for the beginning of the season. But you have to make sure that your top players are healthy. And these joint practices, the scrimmages are not live. It's more of a thud-type practice, and it's a really good way to improve your team and keep everybody healthy.
Bill O'Brien, Houston Texans head coach, joining us here. As far as you deal with injuries, you already lost a Fuller for a bit with, I believe it was a collarbone. J.J. Watt missed time last year with his back. And Coach, I know you know injuries. You get a knee, it's X amount of time. You get an elbow, it's X amount of time. An ankle, the same thing. A back, they say it's X amount of time, but we all know the back is such a tricky thing. So how do you deal with that of the medical side saying he's good to go? Of course, he wants to play and be out there going, as to, man, we really got to make sure this thing stays healthy the entire season.
It's really a two-way street, and I give JJ a lot of credit, meaning, we approached JJ and not just me, but our medical staff, and, we talked to him about, look, this is how we're going to basically have you on somewhat of a pitch count. And as you guys know, with JJ Watt, this guy always wants to be on the field. He wants to be out there practicing. He's just got that type of motor. He wants to be in the fray all the time. And so coming into this season, he agreed. This is something that I have to do. You'll have to talk to him about his off-season regimen, but I know that he's changed that a little bit relative to what he did when he was a little bit younger, pre-back surgery. And the guy's playing really well, Mike. I mean, this guy is playing really at a high level. It's almost impossible to move the ball in practice when he's in there, So I tell Weaver, Anthony Weaver, our D-line coach, I tell him, look, it's like 2 or 3 reps and get him out so we can try to get a first down here. You know what I mean? It's the guy's playing at a high level. We've got a good defense. We have a great bunch of guys on that side of the ball, and it's been really a good, strong camp because I think we're getting better offensively, and I think our guys are really competing hard against each other.
It's funny, they left me in practice to give the offense confidence. It's just, I guess it's the other side of the coin.
Good luck, Coach. We appreciate the time.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, guys, thanks.
Hey, everyone, Mike Golic here. Support for the Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS, consumeraccess.org number 3030.
There were a couple of other things out there that we wanted you to hear. I'd like to hear the soundbite. Do we have the Eric Winston soundbite, yes, guys? I don't see it up on my screen. So I can never mind. I do see it. It's on a different line. So Eric Winston is the president of the NFL Players Association. Mm-hmm. And we understand that we are all in take-to-the-mattresses, tough talk kind of mode, which is just a delight. Who doesn't want that 4 years before a collective bargaining agreement ends, is to hear the league and the Players Association yelling and screaming about a work stoppage that at soonest is 4 years away. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what fans want when a season begins. But anyway, whatever. So Eric Winston, whom we've had on many times.
Yes, we have.
And I generally like. Yeah. I think his heart is in the right place. He has a tendency sometimes, I think, to choose his words in ways that I think works against him. I don't think that he's making the point he thinks he's making. Mm. So let's hear this. I'll be curious to get your point or your perspective on this because I've read the comments. I haven't heard them, so I want to hear the tone.
You read them for face value, and you're going to get the impression I think you're getting and a lot of people are getting.
Let's hear what Eric Winston, NFLPA president, said about the future of the NFL.
Honestly, I don't care, and I don't think the guys in this locker room care whether this thing's going to be around in 20 years because none of us are going to be playing. So if these guys want to own for a long time, then they can own for a long time, but another work stoppage might kill the golden goose. If this thing dies out in 20 years, it dies out in 20 years, but that's not really my concern, and I don't think it's any of these players' concern in here either.
So you hear that, and you initially think, I think what you think, and a lot of people do, is, oh, this guy just cares about the now. He doesn't care about later, the future, the game, the future players of the game, and the union is supposed to be fighting for the players now and trying to lay groundwork for the players in the future. That's always the thought process. And so I understand when you say sometimes you choose your words wrong, and I understand because he actually put out either on Instagram or Twitter kind of a clarification of what he meant. And basically, he was putting the onus on the owners, saying, listen, we're going to be done playing. You want to keep owning for decades, you're going to be dealing with this issue. You're going to go on strike again, or you're going to have a lockout again. You're going to kill this golden goose. Not going to affect me or the guys right now because we'll be out of the league by then. So I get what he was saying. It wasn't as cut and dry with, well, I don't give a damn what happens later on. I'll be gone. It wasn't that way, but I can, in this day and age of headline, wow, look at that headline, and then don't read any further into it, I can see how people would say, wait a minute, how can he say something like that? But I understand his deeper meaning to that.
And listen, and there's the news now that D. Smith may not even be in charge of the union.
I'll go address that. So, Roger Goodell is going to sign that extension. We talked about this when you were gone. He was going to go to 2019, a 5-year extension. One of the things about that is he's now going to be the commissioner during the CBA. It's after the 2020 season. So you're talking the off season in 2021 is when they'll be negotiating the CBA. Now we know the one power person will be in place. DeMaurice Smith, he was started to be the running the union in 2009, and he's had to win an election every 3 years. The last election, a lot of people thought Troy Vincent was going to unseat him in 2015. There's another election in March of after this season, 2018, and then there'll be another one in March of 2021, which will be right when negotiations are going on. And there is a gentleman named Cyrus Mary, who is a civil rights lawyer who actually teamed up with Johnny Cochran years ago and really jumped on the NFL about minorities and head coaches. So right after that, the Rooney Rule. So he was instrumental in that. He's won big cases against big companies, and he now wants to challenge DeMaurice Smith. Again, this is months away, this election, months away. And he says in the last negotiation that DeMaurice Smith was part of, the players went backward economically. They gave Roger Goodell a blank check on power. So he wants to run against DeMaurice Smith. So that's kind of weighing as well on the union of who will be leading the union going into this because it's so far away. So that's the specific there. My thought overall on this, Greeny, is I don't care about any of the talk. Any of the tough. I heard people say this is some of the toughest talk we've heard out of the union. Doesn't matter. Because you know what? In 1987, you know what we did? We not only talked tough, we walked out. We walked out in 1987. We left a wildcat strike. We left. We thought we weren't going to leave the owners. We were going to leave them in a lurch. So they get replacement players. Everybody mocks it, has a good time with it. I'm holding a sign. I'm making $90,000 a year, throwing stones at the replacement buses when the players are coming in, holding up my sign, being my good union guy. And what happens? All the rich guys in the league cross the picket line. So that was our way of where's our unity, and let's stay together and let's fight together. You know what? You can talk all you want. And I hope that the players get a way better deal than this time. But I don't want to hear the talk. I don't want to hear the tough talk because it doesn't mean a damn thing until you get to where you need to get to. Everybody, they need to have a plan going into this. And then if you really are stuck on or you really have those things in mind that you want to get done, then the next thing is the resolve. And you know what talk means then? Nothing. Means nothing. Talk from both sides. I don't want to hear talk from either side. I'm so disheartened with the union and with the league and their inability, especially the main guys, to get along. You got a $14 billion business that you can't seem to figure out to get everybody on the same page. So I don't want to hear the talk. I don't want to hear Eric Winston with the tough talk. I like Eric Winston a lot, but I don't want to hear it. Who knows what he'll even be doing in 2020, 2021. But he's a smart guy, and he could be part of the solution here. But I don't need to hear that talk, and I don't need to hear the talk from the NFL either. I need to see action, because at the end of the day, you can talk all you want. But when your back's pressed against the wall and a player now has to miss a game check, then you're going to find out the resolve of just how strong you are and how strong your leadership is. Until then, I don't want to hear it. Why not? They should be working on bettering the relationship like Adam Silver and Michelle Roberts instead of damning one another until we get to it. So every word they say, they can parse it, hate on one another, and then nobody gets football. So I'm just tired of the whole thing. Sorry for the rant, but it just aggravates me.
You said it better than I could have, so I will not add to it. I have a few other thoughts that actually are on that's the root of it. What you just said is 100% right.
And again,
I have some that would be branches.
I like Eric Winston. I think he could be part of the solution here, but the tough talk on both sides, it needs to end because it means zip.
The best of Mike and Mike.
All right, here we are. We are back in better than ever. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests appear on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. That'll include another NFL head coach today, Dirk Koetter. In just a minute, you've all gotten to know him if you're watching Hard Knocks. He coaches the Buccaneers. We had Bill O'Brien earlier. Obviously, the huge story today is the NBA trade sending Kyrie Irving to the Celtics. We have a Twitter poll question up asking you who you believe got the better of that deal. Right now, 56% say the Cavaliers, 44% say the Celtics. To both of us, it really is the classic trade in which both sides, we think, made out well. Let's get a quick update on your wife's walk. She's been walking all week long, or week and a half now.
She has. She is in the midst of a 17-mile walk this morning. 3 more big days, 17, 18 miles between today, tomorrow, and Friday before I join her for the 3-mile walk on Saturday. When we finish, it's all uphill. It's going to be the toughest part of the walk is those last 3 miles. But her and 31 other pilgrims, as they call it, for the Notre Dame Trail, 317 miles total. They have 3 big days left. They're feeling it. Their feet have been swollen. She's lost a couple of toenails on this, but they're gutting it out. It's really impressive what they're doing. So keep it going, hon. We're proud of you.
It's incredible,
it is.
Candidly, what they're doing.
It's crazy.
And so we'll continue to check in with her every single day and get full updates. All right, back to the basketball in just a few minutes. But again, as promised, our second NFL head coach of the day, and he's rapidly becoming a sensation as everyone watches him coaching the Buccaneers on Hard Knocks. Here's Dirk Koetter with us on Mike and Mike. Good morning, Coach.
Morning, Coach.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Coach, first question. So Bill O'Brien has named Tom Savage the starter for the Houston Texans. Trevor Siemian has been named the starter in Denver. Cleveland, Hugh Jackson is going to make a decision today on who the starter is going to be. We're hoping on our air, if you wouldn't mind, if you would name your starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We're gonna go with a young guy out of Florida State named Jameis Winston.
Well, there you go. Breaking news right there.
Get that on the bottom line.
So, Coach, all kidding aside on that, Hard Knocks, everybody loves that show. You guys are the team this year. What is your overall thoughts? I mean, it's a cool thing for your team and the recognition they get, but cameras at times, does it get a little too intrusive? How has it all been going for you?
Yeah, my stance on that from the beginning, like I tell everybody, I love the show Hard Knocks. I wish I wasn't on it. I do think it's been a chance for whoever's watching to get to know some of our players. I think that's been a kind of a cool deal, and especially Jameis, because Jameis is a very unique leader and a very unique young man and an exceptional player. And I think he's sometimes misunderstood outside of people that really know him. And I think it's been a good opportunity to get behind the curtain and see what he's really like.
I agree, and I want to go to one conversation that you guys had on camera, and this on the backdrop of Gerald McCoy, the all-pro defensive tackle, saying if 3 isn't out there, we basically don't have a chance. You were in a meeting with him, and you said, listen, you're not like a Tom Brady, you're more like an Aaron Rodgers type of a quarterback, and it's time to show that. It's a kid, but he's in his 3rd year, so in conversations even off camera with him, where have they gone? It seems like the expectations now are completely all on his shoulders.
Yeah, well, I don't think that we're putting too much on Jameis. I mean, Jameis wants to be great. He wants to be an elite player in this league, and he's been a winner at every level. I just think that even though some of the greatest quarterbacks in our league, you look at Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger, those guys have a lot of years on Jameis as far as experience, and experience is definitely the best teacher. But nobody's patient. Nobody's patient. We all want to win right now. And, Jameis has played in 32 straight games. He's only missed maybe 2 or 3 plays at the end of a game that we were out of. And he's getting better and better all the time. But, you're judged by wins and losses. We all are. I am, he is, our organization is. So, we're behind. We're all in on Jameis. He's the face of our franchise, but he wants that. He wants that pressure. He thrives on it, as a matter of fact.
Jameis is the only player in NFL history to pass for 4,000 yards in each of his first 2 seasons. Dirk Koetter, the coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, joining us, and you added a nice piece for him. You had a great receiver in Mike Evans, but you get Deshaun Jackson, so talk about integrating him into that offense.
Yeah, one of the things we were missing last year was, we weren't creating enough explosive plays, and we needed that speed guy on the outside. And if you look at Deshaun Jackson's numbers over his career, he's almost averaged an explosive play every time he touches the football. And, for a guy that's smaller body-wise, Deshaun plays big, and he plays really fast, and he can get over the top. And him and Mike together are a good 1-2 punch, and hopefully we can stay healthy. And if we do, those guys are going to make it fun to coach those guys for sure.
We just had Bill O'Brien on, head coach of the Texans, and I asked him this, and so I want to ask you as well. The preseason games where we see the starters not play much, and there's the talk of maybe knocking down some preseason games, but what is picked up, and I love it, is the practices that you hold with other teams. Like you guys were practicing with Jacksonville for a couple of days. So like I had Bill do, if you would talk about just how that is so important in the development of not only your veterans but your younger players as well.
Yeah, sure. We love the joint practices. We did it twice last year, and we only did it the one time this year with Jacksonville. As you know, Mike, when you're in fall camp, and as a D lineman or an O lineman, you're going against the same guys every day in one-on-one pass rush and one-on-one blocking drills. Same thing with the receivers and DBs. It's great to go practice against somebody where you're going against different guys, number one, and the script, you don't know what's coming on the other side. I mean, it's a lot more game-like. You don't know what defenses are going to play. Our defense doesn't know what plays they're going to run. So there's an added air to excitement. We've gone to Jacksonville the last 2 years, and so we've been there. You're there for 4 or 5 nights. You practice a couple days, and then you end up staying and playing a game. I think there's a little team bonding that goes on. We're a team that doesn't go away to training camp. We have our training camp right here at $1 in Tampa. So I think there's just a lot of benefits to it. And everyone wants to make a big deal about, some scuffles that break out. That's just training camp. I mean, there's nothing that's just guys competing on both sides, and it gets a little heated, and, the coaches and the officials that are there, they calm it down. But I think the benefits far outweigh any of the negatives.
I'm so happy to hear you say
Golic
that.
loves training camp fights.
You know what? I get it. It's the rule in New England, and then you saw Kyle Long got thrown out of a practice in Chicago. It happens, especially when you get against the different team, different colored jerseys. I'm so happy to hear that attitude, Coach. You became my favorite coach.
One more for you quickly. Dirk Koetter, coach of the Bucs, says we know you need to run. Your team is among the local teams in Tampa supporting the moving of a Confederate statue from a courthouse in Tampa. Tony Dungy was a big part of that conversation, and we see so much of the social issues that are now becoming a big part of the conversation in football. I just wonder, from the inside, those of us on the outside are talking about it constantly. How much has that become a conversation inside? How much have you talked with your players? How much have you encouraged for them to discuss amongst themselves their feelings on all of these issues as they are out there?
Well, we actually had a team meeting around some of those subjects yesterday, and this is a unique time in the world and in our country, and we can't hide from it. It's real. And so I think there has to be some discussion, and the main thing is we have to respect everybody's opinion, because everybody's not going to agree. We're a team between the white lines, but we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different experiences, and I'm talking players and coaches, and we have to just respect the other man's opinion. I think our guys have done a great job of that. We had a good open discussion about it yesterday. Very proud of the players in our locker room who stood up and spoke. But it's something you're not going to solve in one 20-minute team meeting. It's just something that, our whole country needs to be concerned about, and we need to keep working on it.
That's a great point.
Coach,
well said. Thanks,
are you
Coach.
still, very quickly, do you still have other places you'll go in the office?
Absolutely.
That was my favorite thing from our last conversation, was that Dirk Koetter has "Other Places You'll Go" by Dr. Seuss in his office, and those are words to live by at all times. Coach, best of luck. Thanks so much for the time.
See you guys. Say it.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me on. Thanks,
Coach.
Take care. Dirk Koetter with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, where Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. He had to run to a meeting, so we're trying to jam a lot of stuff in the last minute or two there. But you may recall the last time he was on with us, that came up, and we talked about it at length. He loves that book.
He does. And two things out of that. One, I am not that I advocate fighting all the time, because we probably fought a little too much in Philadelphia, but a few scuffles here and there I have no problem with. And sometimes you see players getting kicked out of practice. It's rule somewhere, and that's fine if it's a rule, but some scuffles happen, and I'm glad that the coach just kind of lets those things go. The other thing, and the way more important thing, is where we are today in these social issues, to where it was kind of just talk about it on your own time type things. Now it's, okay, let's embrace this and let's talk about it and let's see if there are solutions. As he said, he's right. You're not going to solve it in a 20-minute meeting. It's going to take a whole lot more going on, but at least conversations are being had.
Do you ever recall during your career issues that might have taken place that were not running the ball enough, or you know what I mean? But things that were happening in the world amongst that might have divided
there
players?
Was going to be in all honesty, before Jerome Brown passed, God rest his soul, there was going to be a KKK rally down by where he lived. And we had talked, and I was going to fly down there, and I was going to go there with him in protest of it, and it never materialized. But that's really what, as far as a major thing.
I mean, you were going to go down there to be with him, just to be clear, in solidarity and all that.
Without question, with him, and others were as well. But it never materialized.
But that didn't divide you. I'm talking about, because this would be the interesting part here. As you watch what happened, I wasn't here yesterday to talk about the Cleveland Browns and so many players kneeling and all of that. This can become something I can see. Look, there are far more significant consequences to what's happening with this than this, but one of them could be that you have different players in a room who feel strongly on different sides of an issue, and this is something important enough that I could see it could potentially tear teams apart.
It could get a little more heated than not. The only differences we really had was the way our offense performed at times.
No, that's what I mean. So there are the normal,
just messing around.
It's different from Richard Sherman walking over to the offensive coordinator and saying, stop throwing the ball on the 1 yard line.
Nothing comes to my mind that says that was that divisive outside of the world of football. That really had us at odds over anything. So no, I can't recall anything like that.
All right, we are Mike and Mike. 56% of you at this point say you believe the Cavaliers got the better of the deal in which Kyrie Irving was traded to the Celtics. 44% feel Boston got the better of the deal. Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Ante Zizic, and the Nets' first-round pick for next year go to Cleveland. So to recap, for those of you who are just joining us, my overriding feeling is, when you look at what the Bulls got for Jimmy Butler, and when you look to a slightly lesser degree, because Butler still had more time left on his deal, to a lesser degree, what Indiana got for Paul George, who, again, only had the 1 year. They really had their backs to a wall. But even with that taken into account, with those as where the bar was set, I think Cleveland did extraordinarily well in this. I'm very, very impressed with what they got for the trade, because I brought this up on the air a million times. I think I did a Twitter poll question about it. If you're the Cavaliers, do you try and go all in a trade with Kyrie to try and win one more title, or do you take into account your future? And they did both.
They did.
I really genuinely believe they did both. That Nets first-round pick is a sensational asset to acquire. Jay Crowder is a valuable, valuable piece in going up against Golden State in the finals. And Isaiah Thomas, well, I believe I would rather have Kyrie Irving on my team. Last year, Isaiah Thomas was every bit as valuable, if not more so, than Kyrie Irving. So I think they did both. So to me, I think Cleveland did extraordinarily well.
I agree. They pulled it off. They win immediately in the fact that they're still going to go back to the finals. And Boston, we're going to have to take a wait-and-see approach. They could have one hell of a core in Tatum and Hayward and Kyrie, at least for the next couple of years, and then we're going to have to see what Kyrie does. That's a key point here, where we know the end is near for LeBron. Some people think it's his last year here. Others maybe a few more years if he chooses to stay in Cleveland. And they may get a top pick, a top 5 pick, a top 3 pick out of this trade to help build for the future as well. So Their roster right now is just stock full of players you all know that they're going to have to not have some.
They have 20 players currently listed on their roster, and you know all of them. If you now know Ante Zizic, you know all of them. And most of these teams have a bunch of players on their roster you never heard of. Right. Guys coming out of the G League you know all these guys.
You do.
The guys who may not Jose Calderon, Jay Crowder. I'm just going to go through some names that aren't the obvious ones. Channing Frye, Jeff Green, Richard Jefferson is still there. Dante Jones, Darren Williams, Derek Williams.
Okay, there's one guy I don't know, and I can't pronounce his name. Number 9?
Sedi
Osman?
Yeah.
Don't know that one. So we'll go 19
There's 19
out of the
guys, you know. But either way, the point is, they're loaded. Half the league is in Golden State. The other half is in Cleveland. Now, I also believe that the Celtics did very well here. And the reason I believe that primarily is that I think they had made up their mind they weren't going to give Isaiah Thomas the huge contract next year. He's going to be he's 29 years old. I'm going to read to you right now the list of players shorter than 6 feet tall who have ever played in an NBA All-Star game over the age of 30. Are you ready?
Okay.
I'm done. The answer is it's never happened. No player under 6 feet tall has ever played in an All-Star game over the age of 30. I feel terrible saying this because the one thing Isaiah Thomas cannot control is how tall he is.
No, he cannot.
And he did everything you could do last year. You can't play better than he played in the fourth quarter last year. He was as good as any player in the league. You could have Russell Westbrook, James Harden, whoever you want. This guy was just as good. But at the end of the day, Danny Ainge wasn't going to give him $200 million, and I can't blame him.
And we're going to see what happens next summer. When is Cleveland going to? Or is it going to be on his way? Cleveland in the right now of just putting pieces together while you have LeBron to make it back to the finals, they're going to have to make a decision, a long-term decision on Isaiah Thomas that now Danny Ainge does not have to make.
So, again, we're asking you who won the deal, and we're getting perspective from our guys. Here's Jeff Van Gundy on the trade.
Well, I think Cleveland did an outstanding job after everyone knew Kyrie Irving wanted to be traded, to be able to get a great point guard in Isaiah Thomas, someone who can complement LeBron James, a very good 3-4 man in Jay Crowder on a great contract, and then that first rounder from next year. I think it puts him in great position to retain LeBron James, as well as they'll have a lot of options if James decides to go someplace else. So I thought Cleveland did a terrific job.
So I mean, that's what we don't know. We don't know what's on LeBron James's mind. Has he already decided what he wants to do? Was he in a wait-and-see mode of what was going to happen? If he is in a wait-and-see mode, is he seeing enough in the fact that they're going to get a high draft pick as well? Which, again, a 19-year-old that's going to come in, and how much can they help that next year? But something that could be there for the next couple of years, if he is going to stay, that's the great unknown in all of this. We have no clue what's on LeBron James' mind for this. We have a lot of people who feel they know and think they know him well enough to think that he is going to go and he's going to end up in L.A., to which is, if he's already made up his mind, then so be it. Or is it still up in the air? No clue. No idea.
I'll say this. They did the impossible here, Cleveland did, which is they gave themselves a chance to win one more with LeBron, and they gave him a reason to want to stay. Yeah. That Brooklyn pick, now, look, the Nets are going to be better than they were. Maybe it's not the first pick in the draft, but if it's the fifth pick in the
top
draft.
Top 5. It'll be a top three pick?
We would, probably.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be. We had Jeff Goodman on, said it's a loaded draft.
Yeah.
So we'll see. More perspective from our guys. Here's Mark Jackson.
If Kyrie Irving was not happy, which we know, and wanted to be traded, which is well documented, well, you could not have gotten a better package. You went and got a guy that can do some of the things that Kyrie does on the offensive end. You went and got a guy that, for a stretch of the season last year was the best closer in the game in the fourth quarter, statistically. The question, it boils down to this: is the gap between Isaiah Thomas and Kyrie Irving, Jay Crowder, the big fella, and potentially the number one pick? I think they're both great players. I don't think the gap is that extreme. So in that aspect, I look and say, well, the Cavs, won the deal, but I think it was a great deal for both teams.
I agree. I mean, and you almost hate to do that because you're giving love to both and not picking a side. But I agree with that. I think the Cavs win now, possibly later. if LeBron stays with that pick. And the Celtics look like they can win later, but a key component there is, can they re-sign Kyrie in 2 years? But you got 2 years. You got 2 years of him, Gordon Hayward, and Tatum. They have 2 years. Horford, again, I know he's 31, I get it, but you have a couple of years to see how this team can build.
What do you think of this tweet from Curtis Brown? Opinions aside, Thomas has shown he can carry a team to a conference finals by himself. Kyrie couldn't do that as a Cav. I'm going to say this. Kyrie was on terrible Cleveland teams that had been devastated by the departure of LeBron James, and he started there having played 11 games in college. Isaiah Thomas did not carry the Celtics to the finals by himself. He was the best player on that team, and he finished fifth in the MVP voting. But it's a pretty good team.
Yes, it is.
They have a bunch of good players on that team.
Yeah, he had certainly more than Kyrie had.
So that's not really a fair way of putting it. That said, he was the best player on that team, and they were the first. They were the number one seed in the conference. They got to the conference final, and 2 months after their season ended, they only have 4 players left.
4.
They only have 4 players left that were on their roster when the season ended. The 4 players who were on that roster when the season ended, who are still there now. Again, it's only 4 of them left, and that's it. They turned over every other player on their roster. The 4 players are Al Horford, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and Terry Rozier, and that's it. Everybody else is new.
The best of Mike and Mike.
We are Mike and Mike. He's Adrian Wojnarowski, who had the story last night. And again, I thanked him as he came into my studio this morning. I was off for a couple of days. I was looking for a nice, easy first day back, and nothing could have fallen into my lap any better than Kyrie Irving's trade coming down exactly when it did. So we know that it happened. Tell us how it happened. How did this deal wind up working out, and what else was potentially out there for Cleveland?
Well, this was the deal that Cleveland wanted all along. They wanted to do a trade with Boston because Boston had kind of the greatest variety of assets for them to pick from. They got help in the short term, the long-term view with that 2018 Nets pick. Cleveland wanted initially a deal that would have included Jason Tatum, who was a Celtics first-round pick out of Duke this year. They wanted Tatum and that Nets pick. They weren't getting that from Boston. And Cleveland started to realize waiting Boston out for that wasn't going to get them that. And they didn't have leverage elsewhere. They didn't have great offers anywhere else in the league. So they essentially decided, we'll leave Tatum off the table. Let's get that 18 pick unprotected. And then they were able to get to a deal here in the last couple of days.
Was there no way the Celtics were giving up Tatum? Was that completely off the table?
They didn't have to. They didn't have to because Boston knew Cleveland didn't have really anything else. Cleveland didn't have Josh Jackson in a deal with Phoenix. They didn't have Denver wasn't going to give them Jamal Murray and Gary Harris. So Boston was going to kind of wait this out. They knew how much they had to give. And once Cleveland got off of that bigger haul, then Boston was ready to do a deal with them.
How much of the Celtics' willingness to make this deal was driven, because Mike and I are speculating all morning, by Danny Ainge already knowing in his mind, I'm not giving $200 million to Isaiah Thomas next summer anyway. So it feels to me that I don't even want to prejudice the question. How much of this deal was driven by that?
Well, they're going to pay one of those 2 guards, right? I mean, Kyrie Irving, who has 2 years left on his deal, they're in a position to give him his max extension in 2 years, or they would have done it next year with Isaiah Thomas. They chose Irving over Thomas. They chose the 25-year-old point guard over the 30-year-old, the bigger, stronger, more physical player. Listen, Isaiah Thomas is a tremendous player, and he had an historic season for Boston last year, and I think he'll be great for Cleveland. But they made a decision that Irving just gave them in the short and long term was a better play. And this is what, by Boston trading that pick at the draft, moving down, this allowed them to have that flexibility with that extra first-round pick, to be able to go out and use it on a player like Kyrie.
So Boston now doesn't have to worry about paying Isaiah. Cleveland does. So that's this summer. So there are so many tentacles to this thing, and that's one of them. Is he a max player?
It'll be interesting to see what the market is for him next year. And I think part of it's going to play into this. Cleveland gets really good flexibility here. If LeBron leaves next year, they can let Isaiah leave. They can trade Kevin Love, and then they can go into a rebuild. They'll have that Boston pick from Brooklyn, which will be, in the lottery, certainly. And they can and Zizic, the big guy, he's a rotational center. Is another young, probably potentially like a backup center, but a guy who can play in the leagues. Teams like him. And so if LeBron decides to stay, well, then they can sign Isaiah to an extension. So this gives them flexibility where they didn't have to take back somebody with 2 or 3 years, big money on their deal, that if LeBron left, they were stuck with a veteran when they were trying to rebuild. So in that sense, it gave Cleveland what they wanted, which was an out if LeBron bails.
Mike and Woj in studio at the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. We were trying to figure out earlier, and I know you had a couple of tweets on it, how the medical figures into this. Everyone knows Isaiah Thomas has a significant hip injury, so sometimes there's a physical that has to be passed for a trade. Where are the Cavaliers as far as Isaiah's hip?
Well, the Cavs want to get a look at that hip, I'm told. Certainly, really more long-term, and they'll monitor it over the season. Because if they're going to decide to invest in him long-term at 30 years old, and they want it, but they'll have the whole year to see how he plays and physically where he is. There's no danger here of him not passing a physical in the deal.
There isn't. So no. The deal is going to be consummated.
Yeah,
or is
there's no sense. Cleveland didn't do a deal fearing that he's not going to pass. Boston's doctors and Isaiah's doctors both decided that there was no need for surgery, and that what Isaiah has been doing, it's a combination of rehabilitation and rest, and that they think it'll get back to 100%. What they don't know, what Boston didn't know, and what Cleveland doesn't know yet is when he'll be back. Will he be ready for the start of training camp? Will he be ready for the start of the season? Now, that's in question, but listen, at his size, a smaller point guard, you take a physical beating. He did take a physical beating, and that worries you with a smaller player. And so there's no question that's part of this, but everyone I've talked to around Isaiah and around the Celtics with this, and then in Cleveland, has pretty good hope that he'll get past this, and the prescribed treatment this summer will get him back to his old form.
So we've mentioned Isaiah, we've mentioned Zizic, who I say let's just call him AZ. It makes it a lot simpler. We haven't mentioned Jay Crowder, who Green and I both feel is an important piece to how he can help, especially against Golden State. So let's talk about him and how he fits on this Cleveland team.
Well, he was a guy getting a role player like Crowder, who's a winning player, can do a lot of things pretty well. His role with Gordon Hayward coming in was going to be diminished in Boston, so he was certainly expendable. But that was, for Cleveland, their ability to get help in the short term. Crowder's he's a good rotational player for them as they try to win the East again, get back to the finals. And again, it was Boston was the team that could give Cleveland everything they wanted, future and now, and Crowder's a big part of that.
Absolutely. Both Mike and I, and you specialize in breaking news, but just from an opinion standpoint, both Mike and I look at this thing and say if Isaiah Thomas is basically 95 to 100% of himself, adding Crowder, they may be better suited going up against Golden State in the final next year, especially if they wind up with Dwayne Wade. Well, let me start with that question. I feel like it's a foregone conclusion they're going to wind up with Dwayne Wade. I already, in writing down their roster, I already put his name on Cleveland. Am I premature in that?
Well, it's a long way away. And Chicago, these buyout situations come down to how much is the player willing to give up to leave. And remember, Dwayne Wade opted in on that $20 million plus deal, not because he was dying to be back with this team in Chicago, but that money wasn't out there for him anywhere on the market. He wanted to make back some of the money he had given, he had maybe sacrificed in Miami, and so he got it in Chicago. This will be a bad Bulls team, and there will come a point where I think they may part ways. But Chicago traditionally is not going to give up a ton of. They're going to make Wade. They're not going to just give him money to leave, and so they'll work out the economics. It will come down to how badly Wade wants out of there at some point this year, and financially. But certainly Cleveland, the chance to go with LeBron, if he wants to get to a contender, have a chance to get to the finals, yeah, Cleveland makes all the sense in the world for him to finish the year out. But I think that's still something you're looking at deep into the season.
Okay, so it's going to happen. So, okay.
Yeah.
So, Mike, do you feel as though with that intact, with Crowder, and if Isaiah Thomas is healthy, they have a better chance against Golden State as currently constituted than they did last year with Kyrie?
Yeah, I probably think they do. Tristan Thompson needs to come to the table a little more like he did 2 years ago, so we'll see. But I like Crowder in this situation, and that's where I was going to go next with you is a lot of people grading this trade, A's, B's, C's, all that. The only people I care about hearing from is Vegas. They said nothing has changed as far as their odds to win the championship. Do you feel this in all has changed the power in the East or whoever coming out of the East against Golden State?
I don't. I think Cleveland really did about as well as they could have done given what else was out there for them. Kyrie Irving was a tremendous player in the postseason for them. You know, his size, his strength, his ability to finish at the rim. Defensively, both he and Isaiah, they're not stoppers. I mean, that's not what they do great. But I think they will miss Kyrie, and Isaiah's health will play a big factor in how this deal's judged in the short term.
And that leaves one big piece remaining in this incredible NBA offseason, and that's Carmelo Anthony. Where do we stand as of that?
Houston and New York had talked. They've been talking. There's really no way for them to do a deal directly with each other. New York doesn't want to take Ryan Anderson's big $60 million left on his deal. Right now, both teams are relatively resigned to the fact that there may not be a deal to do here before the start of the season, that they'll get into the season and then see where they go. Because the one thing in Houston, they want Melo for the playoffs. They need him. They want him for the postseason. So the idea of not having him for the start of the season or early in the year, if they eventually get to him, they're fine with that.
And Melo won't open up for any other team?
Well, that's what the Knicks are hoping he will. The Knicks are hoping that he'll open it up, and then they can look at some other places to do deals where there's more of a pathway. It will ultimately depend on how badly, if at all, Melo wants to leave New York. What the Knicks are hoping is he'll get back to New York. Maybe it'll be a more functional team. Maybe it'll go better. He's never not liked being in New York. They're hoping that he either says, you know what, I'm okay with staying, or, you know what, you can't get this thing done with Houston. All right, let's look at Portland. Let's look at some other places. They're not there yet, but that's the hope the Knicks have because they're not enthralled with really any deal they could do with Houston.
Okay, Kevin, for the grand prize of $1 million, what color is the White House?
I know this.
5 seconds.
Oh, switching to Geico could save you a bunch of money on car insurance?
Okay. Judges? That's true, Kevin. They'll allow it. Congratulations. You're a winner.
Woo!
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
As the rest of the country joins us, I didn't give you a chance to react to what I was saying there, which is poor timing on my part. So let me just quickly recap my feelings. With regard to both LeBron James a year from now and Carmelo Anthony this minute and Dwayne Wade this minute, I feel like if I had made the money those guys have made, I mean, LeBron, forget it. LeBron is going to make $1 billion in his life. But even the other guys, Wade and Carmelo, they're going to continue making money just being themselves long after their careers. Particularly with regard to Carmelo, who's never won anything. He's won a bunch of gold medals, and he won a college national championship. But he hasn't won in the NBA level. You got a couple of years left where you can still be a difference maker on a championship caliber team. I feel like I would be doing whatever it took to get out of New York. Now, I would do it on my terms. I would have my no trade. I wouldn't let you trade me to a bad spot. But if you were going to buy me out, depending on how close you'd be coming, he's what, $54 million left? You know, I'm not taking $9 million instead of 54, but, you know, you meet me somewhere in the 30s, and I got a chance to go win a championship someplace. I think I'd do it.
Listen, that's the beauty of what everybody gets to do. Everybody gets to put themselves into Carmelo Anthony's situation and decide what they want to do. But we're not Carmelo Anthony. So I don't know. I mean, I get what you're saying. If I had played as long as that and never got a championship, I would want to try and put myself in position to win a championship. Because, you know, I'm sorry. If we're talking about a trade with Houston, he's not winning a championship in Houston. It's not going to happen. And I don't even know if Chris Paul will be there after this year, quite honestly. So your best situation, I guess a lot of people think you're not winning a championship unless you're on Golden State. He's not going to Golden State. So get to the team that's going to face them, and that would try and be Cleveland. I get what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. And in that position, I would probably try and find a way to put myself in a best position to win a championship. But we're not Carmelo.
All right, there's some news that just came across. You tell me if this is big news. The Cleveland Browns have named a starting quarterback for their third preseason game. You're shaking your head. You already knew this?
No, I didn't know this.
Okay,
no.
So it is bigger news again. Sometimes when I'm off for a day or two, you're a little worried about what has been out there. They have named Deshaun Kaiser.
He's going to be the starter.
Their starting quarterback for their third game, which would suggest
he's going to be the starter
that he will be the starting quarterback.
That's what's going to happen now. That's where they are. They were going to name their starter before. This is the dress rehearsal. This is when the starters will play the most. He got time last week after Brock Osweiler started the game. Kaiser got time behind the first offensive line, sans Joe Thomas, who wasn't in there, and got some time there. And I broke him down yesterday. I think he was 8 of 13. I think he completed 61% of his passes. But the difference, when in watching them both, so what are we comparing to? The first thing you have to ask, is he a deer in headlights? Is he lost out there? Obviously, he's not. His strength is his long ball. He can throw the ball a long way. You saw it in the first start when Malik Zaire got hurt. He came in the Virginia game, threw a long pass for a touchdown, the game-winning touchdown. He's got a strong arm. Accuracy issues, yes, he has some of those. Brock Osweiler has accuracy issues. Brock Osweiler in that game had some completions, but not the way you want them for a guy who's been around the league a couple of years. You need to have the completion, as we were talking with Bill O'Brien earlier, a better type of completion that gives your playmaker a chance to do something with the ball. Kaiser has to work on that as well. The difference, Kaiser had 5 carries for 35 yards, and some of those planned runs. So, and you can do that with him. He's a big kid, like 6'4", 6'5", about 235, 240. And he can run. And you can have some of those planned runs for him. And he took off a couple of times. But he's young. He'll hold the ball too long. A couple of sacks. You're going against the Giants, who have a really good defense. So he had pressure on them quicker than he wanted at times. But he did hold the ball a little too long. But he also looks for holes to escape. And he's going to do that maybe a little quicker than he should. But it's a learning process. But he can do it. And he can gain you positive yards. So that's the first thing. Does he have a handle on the offense? And who's he competing against? A guy in Brock Osweiler who struggles with the accuracy of his passes and his completions.
Here are the numbers for Kaiser through 2 performances. So he was the third-string quarterback in their first preseason game. He was the second-string quarterback, as you just pointed out, Monday night against the Giants. He's 19 of 31 for 258 yards and a touchdown, and he's rushed for 47 yards and a touchdown. Cleveland's offense has scored 24 points while he's been on the field. In the statement that was released by Browns coach Hugh Jackson, he said, "We're excited to see Deshaun in this role this week as he is positioning himself well to earn the starting job heading into the regular season." So they're not committing to that, positioning himself well. But assuming he plays reasonably well this week, you're saying it's his job.
They're saying this is your job if you take advantage of this. They're going.
Is it the right move?
They're going to Tampa Bay. Again, if you know me, I have no problem putting young quarterbacks out there to get their eyes watered, their nose bloodied, if they can handle the situations. Because you could just as easily start Brock Osweiler and say, Deshaun's got plenty of time, so let's just wait. But if you feel it's that close with a veteran and it's close between those two, I'll start the young guy, especially in a season where you don't think is going very far. I have no problem with that at all.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Jay Root is the VP of Race and Sports at MGM Resorts, and he joins us bright and early Vegas time here on Mike and Mike this morning on the Shell Pennzoil Performance there. Good morning, Jay.
Good morning. How's it going?
Good. Going well with us. So we're trying to figure out, we don't believe that in our own estimation, the trade yesterday involving Kyrie Irving changes a whole lot about what we expect to happen in the big picture in the upcoming NBA season. What do you think? How, if at all, were the odds moved yesterday after this deal?
I didn't touch a thing. We left everything status quo. We were 8-1 on Boston. Not going to move them down too much. So that's probably about exactly where they should be in relation to with everything that's going on. So we just sort of left everything where they are.
Cleveland, I'm sorry, just so I get perspective. Boston's 8-1. What is Cleveland?
Cleveland, we currently have them at, I believe, 7-5.
And just how much of a favorite is Golden State?
Oh, big favorite. 6-5 right now, or actually minus 7-5 right now. So minus $1.40.
Yeah, you've got to bet less than you're hoping to win in order to get on Golden State's bandwagon. And so, again, the big picture here is you don't see an enormous amount of change. The other thing that we wanted to get perspective from you on this morning is the enormous fight this weekend with McGregor and Mayweather. Sal Palantonio, Mike, I wasn't here yesterday, but didn't he say this is the Super Bowl times 10?
Times 10, and said Vegas could stand to get hammered if McGregor wins this.
Let's start this, Jay, before we get to the hammering, with just the overall magnitude of it. How would you describe this event, comparatively speaking, towards some of the other really big events, be they within the world of combat sports or even in other sports?
Well, in the world of combat sports, this is going to rank right up there with the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight in terms of handle for us out here in Nevada. We've got an opportunity to get to that level, but I'm not sure we'll quite get there. I think in terms of other sports, like the Super Bowl, we're not going to get close to what we do for the Super Bowl as a state. As a state, we did about $50 million on the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight, which, when you think about it, there's basically only about 5 or 6 betting opportunities in a boxing match, whereas in the Super Bowl, we have, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of betting opportunities with all the props and everything. So to be able to do about, almost half of what we do to the Super Bowl in a boxing match, that's pretty impressive dollars for the amount of betting opportunities you have. But, for the year, this will probably rank number 2 or number 3 event for the year for us out here in Nevada, right behind the Super Bowl and the first 4 days of March Madness.
As far as go ahead.
I'm going to say, as far as the hammering, that's a little bit of a different story. This could be a historical event.
Well, okay. So let's first start with how much of an underdog McGregor was and where he is now as an underdog. You explain to us just how much of a drop that was, and can you compare it to any other sporting event that you've taken bets on of a guy that was so heavily an underdog to so much less of an underdog now?
Well, yeah, he was, we didn't put up the fight until it was actually inked because, we host the fight and we don't want to show any disrespect to anyone in the negotiations on the ability to us to be able to host the fight. So we put it up, I think it was June 16th. We hung minus 1,200 on Mayweather and plus 700 on McGregor. But at the time, there was prices out there in the neighborhood of minus 2,000. And the price had opened up, in the neighborhood of minus 3,000, which for the people that don't know exactly what that means if you want to win $100 on Mayweather, you had to lay $3,000 to win 100. So the price I put up, you had to lay 1,200 to win 100. But now it's come all the way down to minus 550. So, there's not a lot of fights that run like that. There's not a lot of sports that, the price moves like this. This would be like us opening the Super Bowl minus 3, the Sunday, the Monday after the championship or the NFC AFC championship, and then at kickoff now the number is 8.5. That would be a massive move. This is just such a underestimation of the kind of money we were going to get on Conor McGregor and his popularity. It's really, we kind of really missed the mark here.
So to be clear, explain that, because a lot of people hear these numbers, and those who don't wager in this way a lot may not understand it. What is it that would make something move that drastically?
All the money coming in on Conor. Right now we are, currently we have nearly 6,400 tickets written to Conor McGregor and about 280 tickets written on Mayweather. And to have that many tickets on a fight, theoretically, that was this far out, because we were pacing on that kind of ticket count, these big differences in ticket count for, the last month. So it's not anything new that's just happened. And, we typically only take 90% of our handle the last 36 hours before a fight. So we still have an enormous amount of handle to come into this fight, and we're really far out on Conor right now. So, we're looking for a little bit of Mayweather money to balance us out, because we have a lot of liability on Conor. I think we're going to get there. I've had quite a few inquiries for a lot of, bets above six figures, and I've had, quite honestly, I've had a bet that a guy wants to come out and lay a $3 million bet down on Mayweather, which, wins close to $500,000. So, there's always a lot of talk, and usually about 20% of those bets show up. So I'm hoping we see, at least a couple of them.
So to be clear, where the hammering comes in, just so everyone understands the conversation, if you can't talk people, if you can't get to a number where you get a ton of people betting on Mayweather and thus balancing that out, that's where the danger is, the exposure is in McGregor winning if you can't give away enough bets for people to balance it out on Floyd.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the straddle that we have, the straddle we call it, minus 1,200 plus 500, or right now we're minus 525 plus 325. That difference is where we sort of try and make our commission, and if we can get that balance, that's where we get our commission. But if we don't get it balanced, we're going to have a large liability. And our liability currently, as it stands, if McGregor, if it were to go off right now and he were to win, we would stand to lose probably north of $3.5 million as it stands right now. And like I said, we still have quite a bit of action to go. And, Conor has a great fan base, and they're going to fly over here. And we're going to have, it's going to be, St. Patrick's Day all over again here in August. So we're going to have all kinds of his fan base and flags flying around. So there's still yet to even that money to come into the equation. So, we're going to need a little bit of money. But on the other hand, this isn't new territory for us. We've always had sort of big decisions on Floyd Mayweather because historically he's always a big price. I mean, he was minus 3,000 against Andre Berto. He was minus 600 against the Golden Boy. So I mean, he's historically a big price guy. And, we've always had big decisions going into him, big, seven-figure decisions. So this isn't new territory when it comes to that. It's just the level of it is, sort of jumped up a step or two here. So, and whether we can get it back, whether we can get those bets to show up because of what happened to Pacquiao in Australia a few weeks ago. That might have spooked off some of the people that want to come and bet this, fairly sizable.
Well, he's come through for you, 49.